"25 years ago, Nelson Mandela made his long walk to freedom. He spent 27 years in prison for his role in the anti-apartheid movement. His release in 1990 hastened the end of racial segregation in South Africa. "18 years of Mandela's sentence was served in solitary confinement on Robben Island. Many other black people were also kept on the island as political prisoners. Prison life was unforgiving. But there was one thing that kept the inmates smiling: soccer. This is the only photo that was taken of the prisoners playing football on Robben Island. Their faces were obscured by the prison warders. Their identities stripped. Their stories silenced.
Well, my name is Dikgang Museneke.
My name is Mark Shinas.
I'm Marcus Solomon.
My name is Anthony Suze.
I served 10 years on Robben Island.
I served a total of 21 years in prison.
And as the founding chairperson of the Makana Football Association.
I played for the Ghana's football club as a left back.
I spent 15 years on Robben Island as a political prisoner. I was convicted on charges of sabotage.
I spent 10 years on Robben Island for high treason.
I played for Manong Football Club on Robben Island as a striker.
I played for Hotspurs as a centre-back.
For years, all of those men lived on Robben Island. When they first arrived here in the 1960s, they were locked up in small communal cells of up to 60 people. They mainly lived on a diet of porridge oats, which had often been left outside and exposed to seagull excrement. During the day, they worked hard doing menial jobs in the quarries and were initially given no time outside for such recreational activities as football.
They call it Devil Island.
It was as if the prison warders had been given an open sesame on us as people, you know, they treated us with complete impunity.
Well, they were very bad, very harsh. Food was bad, living conditions were bad, and of course the treatment from the authorities was extremely bad.
They didn't hesitate to beat us, and they didn't hesitate to expose us to the extremeness of conditions, and the warders seemed to enjoy it when it was extremely cold, and we were underclothed and underfed.
They are rude and saying that within a short time you will have forgotten who you are and you'll remember only your prison number. Here you are not a human being, you are a number.
However, the prisoners were determined to retain their identities and keep morale high. One of the ways in which they would escape from the banality of their cells and the wickedness of the prison warders was by playing a game of football of sorts.
We could not sit. These guys just locked us up and then they expected us to you sit, squat on your mat and do nothing. So what we did was simply to improvise. Get any material that we could get, bond it into a ball, and we start kicking in the cell.
As this thing called soccer took shape, it sort of demanded that it be done in the conventional way. And the only conventional way was that we should go and play outside, and we should have a proper soccer ball.
On the mainland, the fight for black rights continued with demonstrations which extended abroad. Ignorant of what was happening in the outside world, the prisoners on Robben Island pursued their own battle by protesting for the right to play soccer at weekends. In effect, this campaign became symbolic of their larger crusade against apartheid.
We represented ourselves personally to the commander-in-chief whenever he came to take inspection, and we wrote letters and demanding that we be allowed to play soccer.
Tony, myself, and would go and confront these people, and the reaction was punishment.
The warders were very, very aggressive, very atrocious.
Physical assaults, verbal assaults, emotional torture, etc.
We needed an escape, an outlet from long prison sentences. And one of these ways would be to have organized football played on Robben Island.
The struggle for better playing conditions was just part of a broader struggle for better treatment as human beings.
You'd be right to say that this formed part of, or this was identifiable with the whole ideal of being activists.
We're going to stand up for what we believe we are, for what we believe we are worth. So then, in an ironical way, the struggles started right inside prison.
After a number of years, the prison authorities relented. And one day, out of the blue, a prison warder came carrying a soccer ball, and it just threw it at us and says, you always wanted to go and play soccer. There's a soccer ball, go and play.
Now, looking back now, I'm not sure whether they grasped the significance of what they conceded. To say, okay, let them play that FIFA football.
It took us a while before we could erupt into this hilarious joy, and we went running out and screaming and kicking this thing all over the place and falling all over each other, and it was quite funny. It was remarkable.
And I think we succeeded.
Every inch that the authorities gave was a victory, and it sort of also reinforced the idea that indeed one day we will be free as a people of a country.
Although we're in prison, but we're not isolated, because as we kick that ball, we know that through it we're relating to the world.
It was a great escape, and we used it to good effect in order to continue fighting apartheid.
They played on a field outside the compounds. Goals were made from driftwood and old fishing nets washed up from the sea. The noise of every kick and every cheer from his fellow inmates filtered through to Nelson Mandela's cell, helping to keep his spirits up. The prisoners set up 8 teams and even founded their own football association, which they called the Makana FA. It was chaired by Dikgang Ernest Moseneke, who today is South Africa's Deputy Chief of Justice. As chairman, Dikgang drew up strict regulations, enlisted referees, and devised leagues and fixtures. The Makana FA was founded upon organisation, fairness, and accessibility for all. In the prisoners' eyes, things that were the very antithesis of the apartheid regime.
Well, the first job Idris and I, as chairman and he was secretary, was to draft the constitution. So that's the first constitution I drafted in my life. not knowing that in fact, later in life, in 1993, when South Africa becomes free, I'll be invited to be part of the drafting committee that wrote up our constitution.
Some chaps were extremely serious, like Ernest Maseneke, Mark Shinnes, and a chap called Indris Naidu. But just generally people wanted to do things properly.
Football brought some much-needed relief to the prisoners' lives and united those from a plethora of political backgrounds. Current South African President Jacob Zuma played, but Nelson Mandela was kept in isolation and banned from participating in the games. Each team was eventually equipped with their own kit, and they garnered strong fan bases amongst the non-playing prisoners. Many rivalries emerged, the fiercest of which was between Mark's team, Gunners, and Anthony's team, Manong, who were regular league champions.
The game between Gunners and Manong was always an epic moment on Robben Island.
That was what we term as the derby match. When that fixture came, the whole prison came to a standstill.
Manong had an attitude towards Gunners. We always had to beat them. It was a given that Manong must beat Gunners.
Some of the matches, like when we had to play Manong, people could not even sleep.
Football changed the lives of virtually everybody on Robben Island, even the warders.
They really became involved, because they could identify with the rules of the game, with individual excellence.
I mean, the warders were all. There came a point where the prison warders looked forward to the games on Saturdays.
Football helped the prisoners, and eventually other sports and hobbies were permitted on the island. However, as the men came to the end of their sentences, games became less regular and the teams began to disband. For the prisoners, release was tinged with bittersweet emotions. While they were jubilant to be free, they were also upset to be leaving behind their comrades, their teammates, with whom they'd formed the closest of bonds.
I've said that many times. It was probably one of the saddest times of my life.
It was very difficult to imagine life without these guys. To imagine life anywhere else other than here, where weekend it's Manong against Gunners, or it is this competition against that competition.
It explains humanity at best, not at worst.
I didn't say I'm going home. I said I'm going outside. I'm going to be released into an environment that I didn't know.
Well, it was very emotional, because some of those people, most of them, had been through terrible times, but I was only able to do that because they had become very close to me.
It was shattering. I was leaving a part of me behind when I had to leave Robben Island. And that part of me was the friendships I had built over the years, was the certainties I had around me. I knew everybody, I knew what to expect.
And we cherish that memory. We look down and say, yes, time have moved on. Great figures like Nelson Mandela have moved on, but that memory will never pass on.
In 2007, the Makana FA was granted honorary membership of FIFA. Football was of huge significance to the inmates on Robben Island and in creating the South Africa that we know today. The campaign to play the sport became a means for the prisoners to continue their fight against apartheid. And in setting up their own self-governing association based on equality and fairness, the beautiful game helped in many ways to inspire the creation of the Rainbow Nation.